Hello, and welcome to Call of the Wild 4, Chapter 1, Part 2. So for this, we are going to be building on that idea that we worked on last time of looking at how Buck's treatment changes the way he is. We're also going to be looking at the different dog training styles of what they do in the novel versus what they do now, which is much more humane and kind. And kind of determine why Buck needed to learn in the way that he did in the novel. Even though we may not understand it or enjoy reading about it, it was something that was kind of necessary for him along the way in this book. All right, so what happened last time in Chapter 1, Part 1? So if you remember, Buck was stolen from his beautiful warm ranch in the Santa Clara Valley of California. He was stolen by Manuel, who was a garden worker there, and sold for his gambling debts. He was then transported over many days and thousands of miles to Canada to be sold as a sled dog. And during some of this time, he had no food or water, which was kind of what fueled his anger and made him worse along the way. By the time we end that section, he is getting ready to be sold again and is ready to strike at anyone who gets in his way. He's very dangerous, and the animal that we see by this point in Chapter 1 is very different than the happy dog that we saw at the Santa Clara Ranch, where he kind of ruled over everything else and everyone else for that matter. All right, so we're going to watch this quick video to look at dog training, the old way of doing things versus the new way. So the old way is what you'll see in our novel, but the new way is what you're going to see in this video. So in the old days, it was a common practice to show dogs who was the boss by hitting or beating them into submission. However, now we have a much different way of doing things with commands and clicks and rewards and whatnot that actually work a lot better.
This one's particularly interesting, though, because we have tons of big hyper dogs. Now, as you know, I love working with hyper dogs, but trying to convey to people that a hyper dog is a smart dog is sometimes challenging. That's my goal in this class. It looks like a boxer pit mix. Is that what we're thinking?
That's what they said.
We're going to teach our dogs how to look at us by using a hand signal. Dogs are heavily responsive to exaggerated body language. So in the beginning, it might look something like, look at me, like this, really, really exaggerating. We have a nice tight training bubble, close eye to eye. Now, I don't know Biscuit too well, and if you were me, you'd be a little cautious about going eye to eye with a dog like this that you didn't know. Is he good with strangers coming into his area? He is, okay, very good. Look at me. Yes, very good, nice work. Right here, eye to eye. I'm gonna hold up the treat. Look at me, and since I like what he's doing, I'm gonna click because I like that. Remember, the click means good dog, I like what you did, you win a prize. Look at me. And I'm taking my time getting him the treat. As long as you mark that behavior with the clicker to let them know you like it, or a yes if you're not using the clicker, then you can take your time getting the treat to him. The click marks the behavior, not the treat. The most frustrating thing when working with a hyper dog is that they're so quick. It is on us to speed up to keep up with them. We've got to be able to nail the behavior with the clicker the instant they do it right. So in Panda's case, look at me, right there. I mean, as I was saying it, I had eye contact. Right here, look at me, very engaging. You got to keep the rhythm up, you got to keep the pace. You're going to have to make sure the moment he does something right, you're there. He's a fast-paced train, a dog like this. So you can't be too slow. Within the next 5 minutes, every dog in here should be able to leave Turkey alone when we put it in front of them. We're going to show them how to do it without force, without pulling them away in any way. I'm going to drop it on the ground. However, what's she going to do when I drop it on the ground? She's going to go for it. Show me a nice loose leash here. No tension. So I'm going to drop it, but I'm not going to let her get it. When she looks away, same concept. I'm going to click her, and I'm going to pick up the treat, and I'm going to give it to her. Don't touch this. It's not so much the words that you're saying. I think the biggest mistake we make when we're teaching a dog something new is we say words at them. But there's very little heartfelt communication. Even though she may not know what "don't touch that" means right now, she feels my energy. She knows what I'm going for. And we've worked a little bit to build some initial communication. Don't touch this, please. I'm not gonna make her wait for an eternity. Right there, I'm gonna pick it up and give it to her. And then if she's, okay, and no tension on the leash. Only because I know that's the instinct to pull them away. You should have faith in your communication. You should trust that your dog really will know what you mean if you just take a few minutes to communicate with them. Lure training is a concept of training where we use a treat to coax our dog into a specific position. So we're going to use that nose to our advantage right here. So just like this. Good. And we're going to say sit as his butt hits the ground. Now, he already knows sit. Does he know how to lie down on command? Somewhat, but not really. So we're going to use the same concept of training here. We're going to lure him down. A big mistake that a lot of people make with, oh, wow, that's... He's making me look good here. A big mistake that a lot of people make with this, though, is they do this. And, oh, wow, well, all right. Normally, they go fast is what they do. What you should do is you should let them nibble on it nice and slow. Now, if they didn't lie down, all right, he's too good. I need a dog that's not listening quite that well. Yep. Why am I clicking Delilah right there? She did not lie down, but I clicked anyway. She's on the right track. Look, she's trying. It's vital that when our dogs are on the right track, when we're teaching them something new, that we really let them know we like that. Yes, right there. That foot came forward. I'm going to let her know I like it. That's one more step in the right direction. Yes. Oh, good. I'm going to reward that because that was very good. You see how both of those feet started to move, started to go into the down? Notice the training bubble. Nice and low here, nice and tight. You see this? So with a new dog, again, this provides you're very comfortable with your dog and we're comfortable with her, so we're okay with doing it. The next step is one of those feet is going to move forward. At that moment, be ready to click. Do you know what I'm saying? Really good. And good. I love the kisses. I love the affection there. It's very genuine. It's very real energy. The more real you are, the faster your dog learns. Now we got our attention. You never know when you're going to get it, but now that we have it, yes, very good. We want to seize that momentum right there. You see what I'm saying? Momentum is a big deal. We don't hear a lot about that in dog training because a moment ago, she was like, I don't feel like it, but now, all of a sudden, as those moments go longer and longer, that's the beginning. That's a sign that you're on the right track. I got lucky with a group of people here that seem to really get their dogs, and you're very engaging with them. Be engaging with your dogs, and it's such an impossible thing to really teach. It has to come from within, but the more sincere you are with your dog, the more likely they are to respond to you. This is one of my new favorite classes, really, and I love all of my classes. I promise, I do. But it seems like these guys really got it. I saw very little frustration. Do you prefer working with a high-energy dog or kind of more of a chill, low-key dog? I mean, everyone's different. I personally like energetic dogs to work with, but that's me. Let me know in the comments below. Also, make sure you are subscribed and make sure you click thumbs up if you like this video and you want more videos like this, and like me on Facebook, facebook.com/TheZachGeorge. Okay, love you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.
So as you saw in that video, they used treats, praise, and clickers to all tell the dogs that they're doing a good job. That is very different than what Buck is going to experience in this chapter of Call of the Wild. Whoop, sorry, there we go. All right, the assignment for this one, now that you've finished, is to continue to watch the video for Call of the Wild that's going to be on after this PowerPoint for part 2, and answer the questions in the Schoology quiz. So you will also need details from this video on dog training to answer one of these questions. So if you have to go back and watch it again, please do so. Now we are going to move on with Call of the Wild Chapter 1, Part 2. So, picking up from where we left off, you have to think a little bit about how much Buck has changed since being on the judge's farm, and that's something we talked about in our YouTube video. So, 4 men gingerly carried the crate from the wagon into a small, high-walled backyard. A stout man with a red sweater that sagged generously at the neck came out and signed the book for the driver. That was the man, Buck divined, the next tormentor, and he hurled himself savagely against the bars. The man smiled grimly and brought a hatchet and a club. If you're not sure what a hatchet is, it's like a small axe. "You ain't gonna take him out now?" the driver asked. "Sure." the man replied, driving the hatchet into the crate for a pry. There was an instantaneous scattering of the 4 men who had carried it in, and from safe perches on top the wall they had prepared to watch the performance. Buck rushed at the splintering wood, sinking his teeth into it, surging and wrestling with it. However, the hatchet fell on the outside. He was there on the inside, snarling and growling as furiously anxious to get out as the man in the red sweater was calmly intent on getting him out. "Now, you red-eyed devil," he said, when he had made an opening sufficient for the passage of Buck's body. At the same time he dropped the hatchet and shifted the club to his right hand. Buck was truly a red-eyed devil as he drew himself together for the spring, hair bristling, mouth foaming, a mad glitter in his bloodshot eyes. Straight at the man he launched his 140 pounds of fury, surcharged with the pent passion of 2 days and nights. In midair, just as his jaws were about to close on the man, he received a shock that checked his body and brought his teeth together with an antagonizing clip. He whirled over, fetching the ground on his back and side. He had never been struck by a club in his life and did not understand. With a snarl that was part bark and more scream, he was again on his feet and launched into the air. And then the shock came, and he was brought crushingly to the ground. This time he was aware that it was the club, but his madness knew no caution. A dozen times he charged, and as often the club broke and charged and smashed him. After a perfectly fierce blow, he crawled to his feet, too dazed to rush. He staggered limply about, the blood flowing from his nose and mouth and ears, his beautiful coat sprayed and flecked with bloody slaver. Then the man advanced and deliberately dealt him a frightful blow on the nose. All the pain he endured was nothing as compared with the exquisite agony of this. With a roar that was almost lion-like in its ferocity, he again hurled himself at the man, but the man, shifting the club from right to left, coolly caught him by the underjaw. At the same time, wrenching downward and backward, Buck described a complete circle in the air, and half of another, and then crashed to the ground on his head and chest. For the last time he rushed, the man struck the shrewd blow, and he purposely withheld for so long, and Buck crumpled up and went down, knocked utterly senseless. So, because Buck has only known kindness in his life up until this point, the first sign of cruelty turns him into a savage beast, and we've kind of seen that slowly gathering. However, the man with the red sweater beats that savagery out of him. He basically breaks him. All right. He doesn't understand being hit at first, and it takes several times for him to understand this. But once he starts understanding that when he starts striking out at this man, he's going to get hit and it's going to hurt, he learns that lesson fairly quickly. It's a hard way to learn that lesson, but it gets Buck to learn. And this is very important for him. And this is one of your questions on your sheet. Think about, why does he need to learn this lesson to not attack people as a sled dog? How is that going to benefit him learning this lesson? Why is it important that he learns it? And what does he learn about people by learning this lesson? "He's no slouch at dog breaking, that's what I say," one of the men on the wall cried enthusiastically. "I'd rather break cases any day, and twice on Sundays," was the reply of the driver as he climbed on the wagon and started the horses. Buck's senses came back to him, but not his strength. He lay where he had fallen, and from there he watched the man in the red sweater. So just a little bit about the dialogue here. Keep in mind that many of these men are foreigners or they may be uneducated. So Jack London writes the dialogue more in the way that it sounds versus the way that it should be. Like when you see a word like druther, it's a combination of I'd rather. All right, or what. WOT is what. All right, so you're going to see this a lot as you go. You almost have to read it in an accent to be able to understand it sometimes, but I will do my best at that. Answers to the name of Buck, the man soliloquized, quoting from the saloon keeper's letter, which had announced the consignment of the crate and contents. Well, Buck, my boy, he went on in a genial voice, we've had our little ruction, and the best thing we can do is to let it go at that. You've learned your place, and I know mine. Be a good dog, and all'll go well, and the goose hang high. Be a bad dog, and I'll whale the stuffin' out of you. Understand? As he spoke, he fearlessly patted the head he had so mercilessly pounded, and though Buck's hair involuntarily bristled at touch of hand, he endured it without protest. When the man brought him water, he drank eagerly, and later bolted a generous meal of raw meat, chunk by chunk, from the man's hand. He was beaten, he knew that, but he was not broken. He saw, once and for all, that he stood no chance against a man with a club. He had learned the lesson, and in all of his afterlife he never forgot it. That club was a revelation. It was his introduction to the reign of primitive law, and he met the introduction halfway. Facts of life took on fiercer aspect, and while he faced that aspect uncowed, he faced it with all the latent cunning of his nature aroused. As the days went by, other dogs came in crates, and at the ends of ropes, some docilely and some raging and roaring as he had come, and one and all he watched them pass under the dominion of the man in the red sweater. Again and again, as he looked at each brutal performance, the lesson was driven home to Buck. A man with a club was a lawgiver, a master to be obeyed, and though not necessarily conciliated. Of this last Buck was never guilty, though he did see beaten dogs that fawned upon the man, and wagged their tails and licked his hand. Also he saw one dog that would neither conciliate nor obey, finally killed in the struggle for mastery. So Buck is learning that the only way to get what he needs is by this man that he hates. So he has to obey this man because he has a club in his hand. And for the rest of this novel, he will always be afraid of people with clubs in their hands. He's learned to be afraid, and through fear, he's learned to, I'm going to use the word respect, even though he may not respect him. All right. And he definitely doesn't kiss up. He doesn't lick the hand that beats him. He doesn't go above and beyond and try to pretend to be kind and friendly to this man. He just obeys him. Now and again, men came, strangers who talked excitedly, wheedlingly, and in all kinds of fashions to the man in the red sweater. And at such times that money passed between them, the strangers took one or more of the dogs away with them. Buck wondered where they went, for they never came back, but the fear of the future was strong upon him, and he was glad each time when he was not selected. Yet his time came in the end, in the form of a little weazened man who spat broken English and many strange uncouth exclamations, which Buck could not understand. "Sacre dam!" he cried, when his eyes lit upon Buck. "Dat one dam bully dog, eh? How much?" 300, and a present at that, was the prompt reply of the man in the red sweater. "And seem it's government money. You ain't got no kick comin', eh, Perrault?" Perrault grinned. Considering that the price of dogs had been boomed skyward by the unwonted demand, it was not an unfair sum for so fine an animal. The Canadian government would be no loser, nor would its dispatches travel the slower. Perrault knew dogs, and when he looked at Buck, he knew that he was 1 in 1,000. 1 in 10,000, he commented mentally. Buck saw money pass between them, and was not surprised when Curly, a good-natured Newfoundland, and he were led away by the little weazen man. That was the last he saw of the man in the red sweater, and as Curly and he looked at receding Seattle from the deck of the Narwhal, it was the last he saw of the warm Southland. Curly and he were taken below by Perrault and turned over to a black-faced giant called Francois. Perrault was a French-Canadian and swarthy, but Francois was a French-Canadian half-breed and twice as swarthy. They were a new kind of men to Buck, of which he was destined to see many more, and while he developed no affection for them, he none the less grew honestly to respect them. He speedily learned that Perrault and Francois were fair men, calm and impartial in administering justice, and too wise in the way of dogs to be fooled by dogs. All right, so he's passed on to two new people, Francois and Perrault, and they are sled dog drivers who are basically working for the government, and they carry dispatches, which is those are like mail orders, anything that they're going to need to carry from one part of the country to another part. It might be for law, it might be for military or governmental purposes, but they are basically carrying these letters and packages and things for the government that need to be carried. And we also just met our new dog, Curly. Curly's a Newfoundland. Those are very big, large, fluffy dogs. Curly is very good-natured. Unfortunately, in this novel, good-natured as a dog does not always do well for you. In the 'tween decks of the Narwhal, Buck and Curly joined two other dogs. One of them was a big snow-white fellow from Spitzenberg who had been brought away by a whaling captain and who had later accompanied a geographical survey into the Barrens. He was friendly in a treacherous sort of way, smiling into one's face the while he meditated some underhanded trick, as for instance when he stole from Buck's food at the first meal. As Buck sprang to punish him, the lash of Francois's whip sang through the air, reaching the culprit's fist, and nothing remained to Buck but to recover the bone. That would spare Francois, he decided, and the half-breed began to rise in Buck's estimation. So basically, Spitz, that's the dog's name, is very manipulative. He will do mean things when Buck tries to get back at him. Buck gets punished instead. So he tries to steal Buck's food, or he does steal Buck's food. When Francois, when Buck tries to lash out and punish Spitz for this, Francois, trying to keep the peace between his dogs, whips at Buck. However, Buck realizes that Francois is a fair person and he's only punishing, what he can see. So, he still respects Francois in this position, even though he realizes that Spitz is not to be trusted. All right. Spitz is a huge villain and antagonist in this story, and he will just get worse as the story goes on. The other dog made no advances nor received any. Also, he did not attempt to steal from the newcomers. He was a gloomy, morose fellow, and he showed Curly plainly that all he desired was to be left alone, and further, that there would be trouble if he were not left alone. Dave, he was called, and he ate and slept or yawned between times, and looked interested in nothing, not even when the Narwhal crossed Queen Charlotte Sound and rolled and pitched and bucked like a thing possessed. When Buck and Curly grew excited, half wild with fear, he raised his head, as though annoyed, favored them with an incurious glance, yawned, and went to sleep again. So Dave is kind of a moody dog. Nothing really phases him, and all he really wants is just to be left alone. You will find that you grow to love Dave as the story goes on, because Dave's personality completely changes when he's in the traces or the harnesses, and he's actually on a dog sled racing. Day and night the ship throbbed to the tireless pulse of the propeller, and though one day was very like another, it was apparent to Buck that the weather was steadily growing colder. At last, one morning, the propeller was quiet, and the Narwhal was pervaded with an atmosphere of excitement. He felt it, as did the other dogs, and knew that a change was at hand. Francois leashed them and brought them on deck. At the first step upon the cold surface, Buck's feet sank into a white, mushy something very like mud. He sprang back with a snort. More of this white stuff was falling through the air. He shook himself, but more of it fell upon him. He sniffed it curiously, then licked some up on his tongue. It bit like fire, and the next instant was gone. This puzzled him. He tried again with the same result. The onlookers laughed uproariously, and he felt ashamed, and he knew not why, for it was his first snow. So keep in mind, he is a dog that is from California. All right, so the only thing he has ever known is warm, pleasant climate, and now all of a sudden, he's found himself in this very cold, snowy climate, and he doesn't know what to make of it. So he's kind of silly about the whole situation. All right, now that the reading has finished, you guys can move on to the Schoology quiz. Remember, you have all of your questions down below, so if you want to go back and try to answer them on another piece of paper or something, and then go into your Schoology quiz and submit your answers there, you can. So just pay attention to question 15. It asks what the man in the red sweater teaches Buck, and I want you to contrast the way that he teaches to the way that we saw in the video. How are they different? And how, or why, I should say, does Buck need to learn this lesson in the way that he does? How will this help him? And I've already talked about that, so if you need to go back into the video, rewind it to that section. And the last question is, why do you think London chose to title this chapter Into the Primitive? And here's a hint. You will probably need to look up the definition of primitive to fully answer this question. All right. As always, you are using race format style answers. And please have this uploaded as soon as you can. Thanks and have a great day.